Okay, so now we're going to take a look at how we vectorize a logo. So this image is a little bit more complicated than the last one we looked at. You can see we have multiple colors here, and I've pulled up a variety of the same logo so we can really talk about image quality. Before we even get into doing a live trace on an image, we want to look first at the quality of the image that we have to work with. So you can see here, I have a couple different versions, and we're just going to walk through what it looks like when we use the live trace on these images. So one of the things we can look at first is the quality of the image. We can do that by going to our links panel. So I've already placed these images, and we have a very low quality, kind of a mid-level quality, a high quality, and then you can see we have one with effects as well. So if we click on this image using our selection tool and we open our links panel, we can get some information here. And you can see what the PPI is. You can see the dimensions as well. So you can see this is a 195 by 195 pixel image, which is very small. This is probably not going to produce very good results for us, but we'll take a look at that. Then this middle image here is probably a mid quality. It's a 600 by 600 pixels. So again, not a high quality image, but a little bit better than the last one. And then for our best results, I found this image, which is over 1500 pixels wide, and I feel like we're going to get some really strong results from that. So again, you can look at your dimensions. There's no real right answer to what you need. I would say anything over 1,000 pixels is probably good, but that all depends on the image. So try to find the best quality image you can and work with that. And then we'll get into kind of tweaking our results with the image trace. So let's first take a look. We're going to kind of run through this. Let's first take a look at this low quality image up here. So this is under 200 pixels. I'm going to zoom in. You can see, even looking at it here, you can kind of predict that you're not going to get really good results. So looking at it at 200%, it kind of looks okay. We've got, I've got the image selected. So going through our process, the first thing you do, select your image. And then we go over here to our properties panel. We're going to hit that live trace button. It's going to give us some choices. So remember, these all depend on what you're working with. In this case, I think I'm going to choose 6 colors for this image, because keep in mind, this is a starting point, and you also need to remember that white is considered a color in this part of the process. So we know we've got black, yellow, red, and white. That's at least 4 colors. So we wouldn't want to choose 3. So we'll go up to the next kind of basic level. We're going to go ahead and start with that preset of 6 colors. Oh, you see what happened? I'm going to close this link panel. You see it started creating that vector preview, and it's not looking really good. So the next part in our step is to open the image trace panel. So we've got that open here. We can start looking at some of our settings here. So again, those presets with color. We look at the 6 color. I'll show you what 3 color looks like. See, it dropped out of color because it's counting yellow, red, black, and white. So 3 obviously wasn't going to work. But you can get real specific here. You can see this setting here for colors. We can set it at 4, which is exactly what we want it to be. So typing in 4, pressing the tab key, and now we've got only those 4 colors. It's not going to create any extra grays or gradients, but it's still pretty gnarly looking. Let's zoom in on that preview. That is not going to work for us. So we do have some settings we could look at here. We could increase our corners. We could reduce our noise. That helped. Helped a little bit, right? So the noise is finding little details. We go up, the details disappear. If we go down in noise, we see more of those details. It's still not great. It's still not great. So that's that preview we're looking at. Remember, we can go to our view settings and kind of look at these, and we can look at the outlines with the source image. Zoom in there. That's just not even close. That's just not even close. So we know that this image that's under 200 pixels is just not going to give us very good results. So let's take a look at that mid-level image here. So this is the image, looking at our links panel again, that's the one at 600 pixels. So not too bad, but probably know that if this is what we have, we could find a better version. So we've got it selected. Following that image trace steps, we have the image selected, and then we're going to come over here and pick our preset. Again, I'm going to start with that 6 colors. Then we can take a look here. We can narrow that down to 4. If for some reason you don't see all the options, you may just need to open this advanced settings. Now look how good that preview is. That's showing you the tracing results. That looks really good. We can take a look here at the outlines and see that that's pretty sharp. We can look at the outlines with the original image, or what they're calling the source image. There's some variance. Let's zoom on in here. There's some variance in there, so we might be able to get that a little tighter. Look at that R. You can see it's kind of made this eye shape. We've lost the corners in some spots. So we could take a look at reducing the noise, or let's look at the corners. Let's have more of a corner and see what that does to that. Much better. But we've got the corners here in this part of the R, but then over here it's made a corner where maybe it didn't need to be. So let's back that down a little bit and try to get it a little bit closer. Now that might be as good as that's going to get. So you can see this is pretty good. It's making some good choices for us. We've lost the point here. We could play with these settings a little bit more. Doesn't seem to be doing much. This might be the best that this can get. So you know what the next step is then. Once we've got this, about where we want it, I'm going to take a look at that tracing preview again. It looks pretty good. So our next step is going to be to hit that expand button. Remember, we can do that from the properties panel or up here at the control bar. We can hit expand. And when I do that, you see those images pop up. So that one's pretty good. Let's take a look at what happens when we work with a much higher quality image. And we can see if that makes much of a difference here. But it looks really good on the screen as a raster. We're going to select the image. We know we've got it selected because we've got that crossbar here. We can hit image trace on the properties panel, or because we have our image trace panel open, we can press trace here too. Let's hit trace. I guess I did not have my settings right. So we can adjust those because we haven't committed this process yet. We haven't actually done the live trace part yet and committed to it with the expand button, so we can adjust all of these options. So I'm going to go back to color. I'm going to take that down to 4, yellow, red, black, and white. So we didn't see any distortion happen when we started that live trace. So visually, we didn't even see anything change, which means it's very close to what the original raster image is. We can go ahead and change our viewing and go down to outlines with source image. We can zoom in there to the corners and see how that's turning out. Look how close and precise that is. So we've got a corner here. Looks like that is a bit more of a corner than we thought with that low resolution image. But I do think we could have a few more corners. So upping that number of corners here, or percentage of corners, to see if we can just sharpen this up a little bit. Yeah, did you see that pop in right there? So it did, it made it a little bit sharper on this top corner. So I feel like this is a lot closer to what we were expecting as a result, and we're going to get a lot higher quality image with this. So I'll go back to that trace result, and we're going to leave the ignore white unchecked and go ahead and expand. And then we can go back and clean up that white. It looks like we need to do it on this top image too. And we need to delete any areas of white that show up. Make sure we've done it correctly. We can place the color box behind it. Make sure we've got them all. We sure didn't. So deleting that. There's a tiny little speck right here. That one looks good. All right, so now you can see the different quality logo you get depending on what your original file size is. So obviously that one just was not good enough. This one here, this shape around it's kind of rounded because it was reading those rasterized pixels. We're not very precise on these lines either for that mid-level image. If we go down to this high quality image, it's a lot more precise. You can see this is much more about what they intended. It even grabbed a little bit of that black from where those images overlapped. So you can see starting with a good quality image will create much better results. So now we're going to take a look at what happens when we do live trace on a logo that has some effects added to it. So I would imagine that both versions of this logo were originally created as vector images. And the more simple flat image, it's easy to identify the more simple flat image as a vector logo, but this more complicated image was probably originally vector as well, and they've added effects to it. And you might like this version of the logo. It looks kind of cool with those effects on it. But when we go through the live trace here, we're going to see that vector, reversing that process, going from raster to vector, is not going to produce the results that you're expecting. But let's take a look and see what happens there. So again, looking at our live trace image steps, first thing we do is select the image. When we go over here and we hit live trace, it's going to ask us to pick one of these defaults. Okay, so kind of looking at it from a distance, it's not too bad. You can see it kind of popped in there, the vectors. So we're going to go open the live trace panel here. You can see we picked 16 colors. We can always change that. We can go as high as 30, see if that helps. So from a distance, you can see that it looks kind of okay. We're looking at the image trace results here. We'll zoom in. And look at what it has created. So it didn't actually create a drop shadow. It created its own version of each of those bands of shadowing. So that's not really what you're looking to have happen here. And you can tell it didn't do it very cleanly either. If we wanted to look at what that looks like in its actual vector form, we would go to outlines. And you can see that it's really just kind of making up what's happening there. It's not very clean. We can take a look at our settings and see if we can make that look any better, but it hasn't created an actual drop shadow or an actual bevel emboss. It's created banding and color levels to kind of mimic what the original effect was. So I'm going to go back to that trace result, and you can see that in there. Zooming in close. It kind of done that everywhere here. Now we can affect how much we see of that by changing how many colors it's interpreting. So I'm going to take that back down to 16. And again, this is all just trial and error if you're dealing with a more complex image until you get close to what you're looking for. Well, that cleaned it up quite a bit, some of those corners that we were seeing, but we're still seeing so much clutter here. So zooming out, you might be better off picking the more simplistic image so that you're producing something that's more quality, because the effects that happen here just aren't good. I mean, look at that. That's not really what's expected there. Looking at the original source image, you can see it's intended to be a drop shadow, and what it's producing is not correct. You would be better off, in this instance, taking this original image and maybe adding your own drop shadow or bevel and emboss onto the yellow itself and recreating that yourself instead of using this version. But if we were going to go with it, I don't recommend you do. You need to have it selected, and of course, the next step is to hit that expand button. So I have not hit expand. We're going to do that Command or Control Y. We're going to see, oh, yeah, nope, we haven't hit expand yet because we don't see those outlines. We only see that selection box. Again, Command or Control Y brings us back. All right, so just clicking on that image trace result again, kind of toggling our view there. We're going to select Ignore White. All right, and we'll hit expand. And now we've got that version of the logo too. So what I'm hoping you're taking away from this demonstration is picking really good quality art. Sometimes you just have to work with what you have, but other times it's worth it to dig a little bit deeper and just try and find a more quality file. Now that you have viewed these videos on how to create vector images using Live Trace, I hope that you will dive in and explore how this tool can work for you and look at the different options using the Image Trace panel and just play around with those until you get comfortable.